Good afternoon, everybody, or hello, everybody. My name is Brian Jacobs, and welcome to this asiCast. And today we're going to discuss two UK initiatives. First, the launch of the Media Planning Group, a group of people from agencies who are coming together to improve the status and indeed the skills and craft of media planning around the UK. And the second is the continuation of the signals and the noise work undertaken by the IPA, by our trade body, the IPA. And to do this, I'm joined by Ben Cunningham, who's Director of Media at the full service agency IMA, and is also one of the founders of the Media Planning Group, and by Tony Regan, known to many of you, partner of Work Research and long-term consultant to the IPA. So I think we'll start maybe with you, Ben. Could you just explain a little bit about the background to the MPG? I mean, how it came into being, what its aims are, what its objectives are, why now, all those sorts of things.
Yeah, no problem at all. So obviously your advertising Who Cares conference or kickstarted this. So I was lucky enough to be on the committee with the likes of Sally Weavers, Pippa Glucklick, James Shorland, Paul Gafer. I'm sure I hope I don't miss anybody out. But we were all discussing about what's gone wrong in the industry today, and we all felt that there was a decline in sort of the craft of planning or the application of media planning. And we very quickly agreed as well that there was a real confusion in the industry in terms with terminology. You know, what's strategy, what's planning, what's media planning, comms planning. Yeah, things are getting used like differently by different people and different agencies. And I was personally really interested because again, being at a full service agency, which I am today, I was very keen to ensure that the media planning is informed by the creative, and the creative and the media were developed together, aligned under a single strategy. And even frankly, even doing that in your own agency is tough, let alone trying to stitch together media independence, media networks, and creative agencies and so on to do this. So yeah, we came together and said, okay, well, one of the challenges is that I don't know if the industry knows what good looks like. We don't know if the junior planners coming through today are getting exposed to sort of comms planning thinking. Um, and also, frankly, I don't know if many of the clients really are that clear about the benefits of it and why it's important. Because, you know, over the last 10 years, everyone's kind of, or longer, grown up in Meta and Google, which is very much bottom up, short term thinking and so on. So we decided we obviously had a good chat about it, and we've mentioned it a few times over lunch. But we decided, you know, what could we do? And so that's when the MPG was born, and we were thinking, look, the like creative agency strategists have a home within the APG, funny enough, who we've ended up partnering with, but media planners get bits of training from different sources, whether it's the IPA or your own agency does things or other areas. But there wasn't really a place for planners to go, be together, have a conversation about things, do some training, you know, champion their work and so on. So that was a thinking, and that was kind of back end of last summer. And yeah, I can't quite believe next Friday is our very first training session. So where we're going to have a whole day covering sort of nose to tails of media planning, with all, you know, really, really brilliant people from across different agencies. So anyway, long story, but that's kind of where it started and where we are today.
I must admit, it's a great joy to hear of initiatives like this. First of all, of course, everybody's got day jobs, including, of course, yourself, but the others all that you mentioned all have day jobs and have big jobs. And the fact that they're all coming together, or you're all coming together for the good of the industry, I think is a great thing. And putting aside sort of, you know, domestic rivalries, which obviously continue to exist, I think it's excellent you're doing that. Also, the other thing, of course, that's splendid is to start a media group of any description over lunch. I didn't think things like that happened anymore, but apparently they do. So that's obviously very good too. But more seriously, I mean, one of the things that presumably you must have discussed, in fact, I know you did discuss, is the importance of reliable, consistent, sort of trusted data, particularly in an age where we seem to get data from hundreds of different sources, not all of which perhaps are quite as reliable or trusted or validated as some of the others. And that, of course, brings us on to Tony and the Signals and the Noise Initiative. Tony, this is obviously a topic quite familiar to a lot of the ASI audience because I think you gave a paper. In fact, you did give a paper at the Copenhagen event last year. But for those who don't know much about this and weren't involved in Copenhagen, weren't in Copenhagen, could you explain some of the background to it and explain some of the work that you've done with the IPA on this?
Yeah, thanks, Brian. And I mean, I loved hearing Ben's story as well. I was a planner in creative agencies earlier in my career, and then crossed over into media. So the APG was that home for me, and it was a much smaller organisation back then. Um, but it was everything that you described, and absolutely offers a template for very many good things, as you say, as a kind of meeting place for media planners in the form of the MPG. So more power to your elbow. It's really great initiative, and partnering with the APG to do it is a fantastic solution. So that's really good. And in a way, the Signals in the Noise program uh, from the IPA, it kind of originates in a similar observation that you made, Ben, about how the young generation of planners are kind of starting their careers and have been doing over probably for 10, 15 years, kind of with dashboards for social media advertising and kind of Meta and Google systems in front of them, where the previous generation had started their working lives familiarizing themselves with joint industry currencies across all media types. And the three of us all know that, but that has kind of meant that the joint industry sources have kind of drifted away from the spotlight, I suppose, and they're not in the experience of planners at the very beginning of their careers, and so they kind of learn to plan without them. It's So Signals in the Noise was conceived by the IPA and the joint industry bodies together in the UK, and the people who were in Copenhagen have heard this story before, but conceived to advocate for the importance of joint industry measurement because that generation had kind of it had kind of passed them by, was starting to, and that's maybe a little unfair because I'm sure lots of planners are making it their business to know about the joint industry measurement and to know how they can apply it into their work. But it doesn't fall naturally into their laps, and perhaps in an era when automation is coming in, AI and agentic AI is kind of supporting planners in their work. There's the real risk that the joint industry currencies kind of fade from view even more and are kind of hidden inside systems, and people don't really know the provenance of the data that they're working with. So I think where Signals in the Noise looks to kind of meet the same challenge that the MPG looks to meet. We need to raise the profile and raise the level of understanding of joint industry measurement, but raise also the understanding of the benefits that joint industry measurement brings into the planning and evaluation process. And that's why over the course of a small number of years, there has been a Signals in the Noise white paper advocating for the importance of data quality, data integrity, encouraging people to think about the interests being served by the creation of data. So, as we discover the notion in social media channels right now, very topically, of safety by design, the reality is that all of the data produced by social platforms and by Google, etc., is engineered, is designed for a purpose, and the purpose, so to question the purpose, to encourage planners to say, well, who is creating this information, and whose interest is the information being created in? So to try and improve data literacy in agencies was, I suppose, the step in Signals in the Noise, the first white paper. And the follow-up, the second album, so to speak, was Signals in the Noise, published recently as a white paper and with a webinar, with a real focus on effectiveness. And really what this time we are challenging the industry about is the discrepancy between all the things we know about how advertising works, how it forms memories in people's minds, how how all of the best practice that we know from Byron Sharp, from Peter Field, Les Binet, the attention industry, Karen Nelson Field, all of the things we know from neuroscience, from behavioral economics. There's so much evidence that is available to the industry and that the industry is familiar with, and wasn't there a generation ago. A scientific understanding of how advertising actually works to build memories, essentially build brands. But it was kind of being lost in the pursuit of outcomes and measurement using numbers provided by platforms. And so we've tried to tell a story about the picture of effectiveness that can be created when you link campaign exposure to business effects using modeling. And we welcome the renaissance of MMM, which sort of went away, in a sense, went out of fashion a little bit in the attribution era, let's call it that. But now we're back into modeling, which can be quicker, faster, cheaper than before. And we really want the joint industry currencies not just to be included in those models, but for modelers to really appreciate the nuances of how those data sets are built, what's the methodology behind them, how they can slice and dice the data to really bring to life the contribution made by those channels that are measured by JICs in the eventual road from a consumer being exposed to advertising to then taking action and being a customer of a business.
Ben, is this whole issue of data central to what the MPG is going to try and do, or what we are trying to do?
Well, I think it's definitely a key element to it. So there's the MPG is going to cover quite a lot of ground. So as I mentioned, we're talking about, creativity and media planning, as well as like engineering a plan and audience insights and, measurement effectiveness and so on. So at different stages of what, we're going to be training, so the media manager types or planners at that kind of mid-level. We're going to be covering lots of ground, but I do think it's really, really important to talk about the JICs and the stuff that Tony's just mentioned, because frankly, I don't think the awareness is high enough with regards to this across the industry. If people say JIC, they might think it's just a mail thing or a door drop thing or something. There's a perception issue there. And also when, I've seen it with, my team and other teams, when we're trying to compare, apples with oranges, and they're saying, well, we've got this many impressions in Meta or this much but we've only got that in TV or print, or you're like, well, you can't compare the two. They are completely different. So again, there's a big job to be done. And even in like the likes of PR, where they talk about reach and impressions, it's completely, it's nothing like the reach that in the JIC world. That's much more, has been validated and is consistent across different channels and so on. So I do think in the module where we talk about engineering a plan and putting the plan together and making media channel choices, and it's quite top line. So it's talking about which channels to consider. We don't get into the line by line planning element, but to say as one of the inputs when you're making those decisions, as well as does the channel, reach the target audience, capture their attention, can the creative come to life in that channel, etc., etc. Then when you're making your decisions, you want to be using like for like metrics when it comes to audience numbers and reach and so on. So I think it's really, really important there. And also, Tony, you mentioned about MMM, using that data, apples v apples is absolutely vital for any kind of modeling work. I know a lot of the modelers used spend data, I suppose, to try and kind of get a like for like, but they are using impression data as well. And back in the day, I remember always trying to get to a GRP that was kind of relevant across channels, and I always found it quite confusing, if I'm honest. So yeah, I think it's really important, and it will be an element that over time the MPG can start to kind of bring out a little bit more, but we're just kind of finding our feet at the moment.
I mean, Tony, this is an interesting point about JICs or joint industry committees, just generally, because I mean, we've all grown up over here with that meaning a certain thing. And the certain thing, I guess, is that the whole industry of whichever channel it happens to be comes together, co-funds, co-organizes, indeed co-owns, the measurement system. So Barb or whatever it may be is owned obviously by the vendors and by the agencies and by the advertisers and so on. And they all jointly fund this and come together in numerous committees, as most of us have had the misfortune to be on many of those things. to discuss what's best for the industry as a whole and to come to some sort of conclusion. How
Mm.
important is it that this ownership and co-funding thing, how important is that versus just a sort of more general sort of collaboration of the sort of thing that happens, say, in the US, where they've got a thing they call JICs, but we wouldn't recognize it as a JIC because it doesn't have the same kind of construct of organization or indeed funding. I mean,
Mm.
how crucial is it, do you think, to bring the co-funding and co-ownership thing to the fore and to make that a sort of how important is that to the way in which the JICs are organized?
Well, certainly our experience in the UK, as you say, Brian, has been a good one, a privileged one, and we've had many decades now of operating. I think the joint industry system originated in the UK, sponsored and established by the IPA as a trade body. So the idea is a UK idea, and I guess while in other markets that it may not be possible to kind of entirely emulate the model, certainly in the UK we're ambitious to make sure that we maintain the principles, the governance, the integrity of what lies behind them, which is kind of for example, the buy side and the sell side are collaborators. So is the number a big number or a small number? Well, we'll need to thrash that out behind the scenes in the design of how we gather the data and how we report the data, and then all sides of the transaction endorse that number, and that number is the one that the industry agrees upon, and that's how the trading is done. So those are crucial uh, elements of design and governance for a joint industry measurement system to be a trading currency. There has to be the ability for both sides to agree that the number is the number, and that is the industry number. Now you can generate your own data to describe how maybe your medium or your particular brand as a media brand might offer even more than the numbers suggests. And we've seen plenty of examples of that. But that's not the responsibility of the joint industry measurement, which is to provide the harmonized number for all participants. Um, it's I think reaching high, aspiring high, and aspiring to a kind of pure high standard has got to be worth trying for, because what happens if you don't have that is you start to get a kind of disintegration, you end up with numbers that are competing with one another. So which is the right number? You end up, yeah, with too many questions about the number rather than that an acceptance that the number is the one that the whole industry endorses. So
Mm.
it really is by the industry for the industry. And to Ben's point, the apples with apples, is both within a joint industry system like the one that Barb's responsible for AV in the UK. It's kind of for every participant in that. There is a standard definition that applies to viewing whatever kind of viewing, whatever device it is, whatever kind of viewing, whatever the provider of the content or the advertising is however they are sending it. There's a standard metric within, but it's also about standardization across different media, because the best media plans are the multimedia plans. And so you've got to be able to say, well, if we can achieve reach, so the planner that Ben's talking about is saying, well, I've got certain elements of my plan nailed down, but I've got other things that are kind of at my discretion. Do I go out of home? Do I go radio? What's my next step? And I need to be able to make a comparison as a planner between what the reach and frequency might be achievable from this side or from this side. And it's about informed decisions, informed decision making about your investment. And
Well, I do
that's
remember. I do remember when I worked in the States for a short time. It was around about the time that there were two readership measurements, two
yeah.
competing using different techniques, and in the agency, you spent so much time listening to magazine A, who happened to be benefiting more from technique A,
Mm.
promoting the benefits of technique A, only to see magazine B come in and talk about technique B, and you sort of think you're spending all your life worrying about the appropriateness of the techniques rather than the benefits of using these magazines for doing whatever it is you want them to do.
Mm.
And that struck me at the time as being a total waste of everyone's time. Much more sensible to have firm foundations. I mean,
Yeah.
whatever the foundations are, you can agree on,
Yeah.
as you say, amongst yourselves, amongst the industry, and then you build on the firm foundations. If your foundations are wonky in the first place, the whole thing will fall down.
Mm.
So you've got to spend a lot of time building, making sure your bricks are really good before you build your house. Because if your bricks are not very good, the whole house is going to fall down. So,
Yeah.
it's very important. And people don't appreciate the amount of work that goes into doing this. And so all credit to, your work, Tony, and the IPA's work, frankly, in making sure that this sort of thing happens. I mean, when it comes to
And
cross-media stuff, yeah,
yeah.
sorry, Tony. Yeah.
No, I think that, setting a high standard, doing things properly, as you say, and by agreement, it's also about not duplicating, as well as not duplicating time, which obviously is a thing that ripples out through the whole supply chain, I suppose. If measurement is something that people can't be confident in, then you end up having to spend more time maybe doing some other measurement. So we've got, I don't know, digital video with certain claims being made about views or impressions on it, and then sort of say, well, we're going to keep getting that number from that platform, but we need another number which satisfies us about whether it's brand safety or whether it's attention, or so then there are layers and layers of data that have to be added to solve the problem. And it means the industry's duplicating time and money on layers and layers of measurement, when actually if the agreement could be made for everybody to participate in the one system, then there's great efficiencies there. I think there's something topical about, it's been said we live in a post-truth society, and that every claim has got a counterclaim, and our young generation of planners are living through and experiencing a kind of a culture, personally as well as professionally, where it seems that every claim has a counterclaim, like your two magazines in the US many moons ago, Brian. And if every claim can be counterclaimed, people are just going to go around in circles.
Yeah. I
With
mean,
that.
Ben, presumably, I mean, as planners, I mean, I hadn't, obviously, it's a long time since I wrote a plan, but as planners today, I guess you're not only looking obviously at advertising forms, but there's all kinds of other forms as well, of communication channels, whatever they may be.
Mm.
And presumably, the more data you have and the more confidence you have in that data, whether it's modeling, I mean, you mentioned modeling. I mean, again, you can feel much more confident, can't you, if an input into the model is something everyone's agreed on.
Yeah.
If you go back into the model and you find that actually somewhere down there's something that someone's chucked in which has got nothing to do with anything, then you question the whole thing, don't you? So presumably what you're trying to do is fit together different data from multiple sources and hope
Yeah.
that they kind of fit somehow.
And well, I think one that stands out, and I don't want to get my team in trouble, but yes, at IMA, I look after the paid, owned, and earned media team. So you've got PR and social and influence and other elements, as well as the sort of broadcast and print and all the rest of it. Um, and often what we would do, we kind of present, you do your post-campaign analysis, a very basic one, where you're looking at, the delivery of the advertising that went out, how many people you kind of got the advertising in front of. But then you'll get the PR team would say, oh, we had a reach of like 43 million people. And I'm like, well, okay, but did you? And they're going, yeah,
Yeah.
but well, our article ran on MSN. Right, okay, but not it's not their fault, but they go onto the system and they go, right, MSN, global reach is this big number. So when they're doing the post-campaign analysis for PR, we had potential reach of 43 million people. And you say, okay, well, come on, you've got to think about it. This is how many people are in the country. Are you likely to get across all these? So you're looking at 43 million in PR, but we only were reaching 3 million through TV or whatever it is.
Mm.
So it is a problem. I mean, if you can't question it, and same with your point around readership and circulation, and at least we all decided we had to trade on circulation, so people could bandy around the readership figures all they wanted, but you'd ignore them and go back to your cost per thousand on the circulation and so on. But I think it's a big challenge. Yeah, like you say, there's work to be done in paid media with VOD and CTV and linear TV. But then there's also, as you say, you've got to think about social and content and PR and digital PR. And obviously now you've got the rise of kind of the LLMs and advertising on ChatGPT, and what are their numbers going to look like and how do they stack up? But so it's an ongoing challenge, yeah, that's for
I
sure.
think, I mean, I can tell you what the numbers are going to look like, Ben. They're going to be very, very big.
But good, yeah, until we charge more.
I mean, whether they're accurate or meaningful or of any relevance at all, let's set
Mm.
that to one side. One thing you can be absolutely guaranteed is that they'll be huge. That seems to be the way of the world. And I think, actually, Tony, you make a very interesting point about how people, throw numbers out there. I mean, I've just obviously we've had the brand safety thing, the online safety thing is obviously a hot topic at the moment and top of everybody's mind with the government's ban on social media for under 16s. But already I'm seeing all kinds of figures being bandied about, which seem to come from absolutely nowhere. I mean, they're kind of mysterious, to put it mildly. And I do know, talking, as you mentioned, you were kind enough to mention advertising. Who cares? We had this event last week, and in the in the online safety conversation around that, one of the points that was made was no one's really sure whether or not the government that are making these decisions around this particular topic at the moment
Mm.
are that familiar with the data behind the issue.
Mm.
And
Mm.
if they're not familiar with it, then they're at risk of making the wrong decision, or at least they're not making the most informed decision. So I think it's not just within our little bubble of an industry, but I think it's also around policy and regulations and all those sorts of things, which go far further than just the advertising world, where numbers like the JIC numbers are absolutely vital, and they need to be positioned as such to people beyond our world. They're just, and often they're not. They're, oh yes, we got some numbers from someone over here who just told us there were more people seeing our social media feed than there are in the country or something. And you
Yeah.
just think,
Well, it needs the planners to use their brains, which is good, and that's what we're trying to encourage. As we develop AI tools where you drop the brief in, it'll tell you which channels to like put on your plan. You're going to need media planners there to interrogate that and understand if that makes sense, or the danger is not enough of interrogation will go on, and that's a big part of what we want to do with the MPG, is to try to encourage that human input. Even if you are using AI, the questions to ask at which stage and what to look at. So
yeah, and
yeah,
it's being curious, isn't it? It's being curious and
yeah,
just being and asking these questions, not feeling, oh, I shouldn't be asking that because I really should know that. It's
yeah,
encouraging that sense of sort of curiosity because no one knows everything. So go and ask, and ask the question.
yeah,
There may be a straightforward answer, or it may be everyone looking at their shoes and saying, well, actually, we're not sure, but here's our best guess. But at least a best guess is better than nothing at all.
Yeah.
Just to finish, Tony, or in fact, for both of you, really, I guess. I mean, we've heard from Ben about the importance of fitting data together from all kinds of different sources and all kinds of different media. And as you said, we've now got LLMs and all sorts of other things coming along. Are these things sort of on your agenda as you look at the initiative with the IPA and the JIC initiative? I mean, when it comes to trying to fit things together from all kinds of different sources, I mean, is this something that the relevant IPA committees are looking into and the relevant JIC organisations are looking into?
Well, certainly there's a very high priority that we're attaching to the way that data flows from joint industry bodies into the systems that are proprietary systems to the agencies, or into models that analysts are building bespoke to client. And it's clear that in many ways JIC methodologies have been built to reflect the times that they originated in, and there are contracts and renewals and refreshments, etc., of the methodology over time. But what's a high priority for us is that all the JICs figure out how to optimize the provision of data so that it flows easily into agency systems, maybe through APIs, or it is familiar to modelers so that they know how they can pull the data, rather than, as in Ben's example, the modeler gets given a number. Oh, you asked for the out of home data. Well, here are some impressions, and if it's campaign impressions for a whole period of time, for 2 weeks or for longer, then that's very difficult for a modeler to show the contribution made by out of home. But if they if they know that they can pull that data, slice and dice it, play with it in different ways, cut it regionally, all of those sorts of things, then they can start to see the opportunity to show the contribution being made by out of home. So that data literacy on the receiving end for modelers and for the people building these agency systems, it is a high priority for for all of the JICs.
Yeah, and
I
of
don't know if that
course,
quite answers. Does that
yeah,
answer your
no,
question?
no, I think it does. I mean, I think it's a difficult task, isn't it? Because on the one hand, you've obviously got to make sure that within medium, within channel, whether it's TV or whatever it is, the best possible job is done using the best possible techniques and the most appropriate measurement that's available, and the same for every other channel. But at some point, and this has been a problem as long as you and I have been around, Tony, at some point you've got to kind of fit these bits together, haven't you? Because Ben's job is to make sure that ultimately he mixes the ingredients of the cake in a way that delivers something delicious as opposed to something that I might have made, you know. Um,
Yeah,
so you need to have excellence by channel, but then you've always got to bear in mind that that's not the whole thing. You've got to have a way in which you can sort of fit things together appropriately that can be used by planners. Of course, a lot of I would guess actually most of probably all actually of the MPG members are IPA agencies, aren't they?
mm,
I would guess that their views will be fed back to the IPA in the usual way. Anyway,
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
I think that there's something about there's something about planning being a step in a cyclical journey of kind of media management. So, you've got and towards ever thus, but, you identify who your audience is, you gather some insight about that audience, you capture a pattern of media behavior and consumption from them, you use that to build a plan, you evaluate the plan and you kind of, you work your way around. I think agency systems certainly have the ambition of being able to maintain a kind of consistency of view of the audience all the way through that along that pathway. And that historically hasn't been easy because you hand off from somebody building cluster analysis in TGI to segment an audience through to then a buyer maybe buying optimizing TV using demographics. So you've got those handoffs. And the ambition is for that to be, I'm sure Ben can talk to this, the ambition is to be able to make that more seamless through the journey that happens from brief to execution to evaluation.
Yeah, and also you've got to question what's like real, because you often get people, new suppliers popping up. You say, right, how do we translate our sort of planning audience? Oh no, we can do that perfectly. We've got all this data, and that will, match back. And you're trusting these people, really, and especially with like AI systems and so on, where it's even more, unclear. You're
Mm.
putting a lot of faith in, what you're seeing is going to be robust and validated. Because, I've seen some like planning tools recently, AI planning tools, where they're looking at media consumption data, but they can only get access to media consumption data through sort of publicly available sources because they're not actually paying for, maybe Ofcom has done a report and they use that data. I don't know. So they're saying, yeah, this is the media consumption. It's going, well, how can I'm much more confident in my team using Telmar that's fed by YouGov or TGI data in touch points to give me that media consumption behavior than, this AI tool's seen some reports over here that kind of. Yeah, so again, I think the questioning and the interrogating and probably being slightly less trusting of the snake oil that sometimes
Yeah.
is about, I think is really important at the moment.
Yeah, it's
yeah. I
a kind of
mean,
healthy skepticism. We need, it's kind of, as you say, Brian, it's curiosity, but it's also data literacy and yeah, healthy skepticism, a kind of suspicion in a sense as your start point to kind of
Yeah,
go, who's giving me this data and where have they got it from and
yeah,
yeah.
why?
yeah,
I mean, I obviously the people who are selling enormous audiences, of course, are selling enormous audiences as measured by them, So,
Mm,
yeah,
um, and of course, to a point, they're of course right. I mean, they are reaching an awful lot of people,
mm,
but reach with a small r, as opposed to reach with a capital R of the sort that all of us would recognize as being kind of validated and verified and checked by someone.
yeah,
Um, And that's the problem I've always had with the walled gardens, that it may easily be that what Facebook or whoever say is perfectly good, but no one knows that because we can't get at the underlying data to look at it, to verify it and to validate it. And we just have to take it on trust.
Well, I think you can learn from modeling, and I know we're wrapping up now, but I think when you look at, a client's performance through Meta or Google through their analysis, the campaign can look like, very effective. When you run it through some MMM or econometrics, it tends to not be as effective as when Google and Meta mark their own homework. So I kind of almost apply that ratio to even the planning numbers that you see is almost like, okay, they're going to overinflate by a quarter, whatever we think it is. Let's just kind of have that mindset with everything that comes out from those guys. So
Yeah.
that's just my thought.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think there's
Okay.
something about back on when I was talking about the kind of the strategic understanding, the neuroscience, the behavioral economics, the Byron Sharp, et cetera, that we now have. That it's really important as well, and I'm sure the MPG will be kind of advocating for this, that planners understand what that Byron Sharp thing about reach really means, and it isn't just a kind of catch-all term that says reach is worth having wherever you get it from, and therefore it's worth listening to any claim from any vendor about the reach and the impressions and the audience that they can deliver. If you get a little too beholden to the simplistic idea of reach, you're going to fall victim to the claims that are being made by
Yeah.
by
Okay, well, that's a very good point, and I think a good place to wind this up. So if I may just thank Tony Regan from Work Research and consultant to the IPA, and Ben Cunningham from IMA, and of course one of the founders of MPG. And I think all of us, and if I may speak for Mike and the whole ASI community as well, would say we all wish the MPG really well. I think it's a great initiative and well done for coming up with it. Thanks a lot for joining us, and see you again soon. Bye now.
Thank you.
Thank you.